Friends, a Hafiz girl who had memorized the Quran was married to a monkey. This is a true incident that you may have never heard before. On the wedding night, the monkey did something so disgusting to the Hafiz girl that everyone who saw it was left in agony. We request you to watch this painful incident till the end. In ancient times, there was a righteous king. One time, the king went out for a stroll with his minister and set up camp near a forest. When it was time to eat, the dining spread was laid out. At that moment, the king noticed a monkey sitting on a large tree, observing everything silently. The monkey was not displaying any typical monkey-like behavior. The king ordered his servants to place a little food in front of the monkey as well. The servants obeyed and placed some food in front of the monkey. The monkey climbed down from the tree, took a small slate, wrote something on it using charcoal, and then handed it to the king. The writing on the slate said, "I will not eat such food. Rather, the same kind of dining spread that has been laid out for the king should be set for me as well." The king was astonished upon seeing this. He immediately ordered an identical dining setup for the monkey. After this, the monkey climbed down from the tree, ate the food, and then climbed back up. Suddenly, dark clouds covered the sky. The servants hurriedly began packing up everything. The king instructed his servants to place a piece of coarse cloth in front of the monkey so that it wouldn't get wet in the rain. The servants followed the order and placed the cloth near the monkey. Once again, the monkey wrote something on a slate and handed it to the king. It said, "The same kind of tent that has been set up for the king should also be set up for me. Only then will I come down." At the king's command, an identical tent was prepared for the monkey. As soon as it started raining, the monkey came down from the tree and went inside its tent. A few days later, when the king was preparing to return to his palace, he instructed his servants to ask the monkey if it was willing to come with them. The monkey once again wrote something on a slate, stating, "Just as an elephant has been prepared for the king, an identical elephant should be prepared for me. Only then will I go." The king, now intrigued by the monkey, arranged for a similar mount for it. When they reached near the palace, the king ordered that one of the tents meant for the servants be given to the monkey. However, the monkey once again wrote, "Just as a palace has been built for the king, an identical palace should be built for me. Only then will I stay there. Otherwise, I will return to the jungle." The king had another palace where he rarely visited. That palace was given to the monkey. The king's wife and servants became extremely afraid of the monkey. Meanwhile, the monkey started visiting the king's main palace as well. The monkey listened to court cases very attentively. Whenever the king was about to make a wrong judgment, the monkey would immediately snatch the paper from the king's hand, tear it up, and then write the correct verdict with the pen before handing it back to the king. At first, the king was furious, but then he realized that the monkey had saved him from making many mistakes. The king had a beautiful daughter whom he loved more than anything. She too became curious about the monkey. One day, the princess came with her friends to see the monkey. When the monkey saw the princess, he kept staring at her. Frightened, the princess quickly ran inside the palace. After that incident, a strange thing started happening. Whenever the princess dressed up and looked at herself in the mirror, she would see the monkey's face appear behind her. No one knew how the monkey managed to enter her room. One day, the monkey handed the princess a note. It read, "Will you marry me? Believe me, I am very handsome." The princess knew that this was a well-mannered and civilized monkey who would not harm her. She was a very kind-hearted girl, a Hafiz of the Quran, and full of goodness. Slowly, she began to develop sympathy for the monkey. When this news reached the king, he was displeased. He could not tolerate the monkey entering his daughter's room. The next day, the king went to meet the monkey. The monkey was present in the palace. The king said, "Look, I don't know who you really are. I have accepted all your demands and given you equal status to mine, something no other king would ever do. But now you have started troubling my daughter, and I do not like this at all. Before I take any strict action, you should stop immediately." The monkey quickly fetched a piece of paper and a pen from the palace, wrote something, and handed it to the king. It read, "I want to marry your daughter, and I promise to always keep her happy." Double asterisk. The king was completely stunned. "Marry my delicate, flower-like daughter to this monkey? That can never happen," he thought. The king firmly said, "This is something that will never happen in my lifetime." In an instant, the monkey snatched the king's sword from his waist and with his other hand wrote, "If it cannot happen in your lifetime," means that the monkey was not an ordinary being. He was actually a human who wore the skin of a monkey. The queen was shocked by this revelation and carefully left the place, making sure not to alert anyone. The next morning, she called the king and told him everything she had seen the night before. The king was equally astonished, but now understood why his daughter was so happy. He decided to confront the so-called monkey and get to the bottom of the mystery. That night, he hid near his daughter's chamber and waited. As expected, the monkey entered the room and removed his disguise, revealing himself to be a handsome young man. The king immediately stepped forward and demanded an explanation. The young man, realizing he had been caught, bowed before the king and said, "Your Majesty, I am actually a cursed prince. A sorcerer turned me into a monkey, and the only way to break the curse was to marry a noble and pure-hearted woman. Your daughter, being a hafiz of the Quran and full of kindness, was the one who could free me." Hearing this, the king was overwhelmed with emotions. He now understood why fate had brought the monkey into his kingdom. The next day, the prince revealed his true form to everyone in the palace. The queen, who had once been against the marriage, was now overjoyed, and the entire kingdom celebrated. The king officially announced the young man as his son-in-law, and they all lived happily ever after. The princess realized that this was the very city where her prince lay sick. She headed straight for the palace. Upon arrival, she saw a crowd of courtiers and healers gathered, all distressed because no one could cure the prince. Disguised as a physician, the princess stepped forward and said, "I can heal the prince, but I need 40 days without any interference." The king, seeing no other option, agreed to her condition. The princess began applying the mixture of the partridge droppings and sandalwood paste to the prince's wounds. From the very first day, there was a visible improvement. Slowly, the prince's pain lessened, and his wounds started to heal. On the 40th day, the prince was completely cured, his lost beauty restored. When he looked at the physician, he immediately recognized that this was no ordinary healer. It was his beloved wife. Tears welled up in his eyes as he exclaimed, "My dearest princess, you have endured so much for me." The entire palace was stunned by the revelation. When the king and queen learned the full story, they praised the princess for her bravery and devotion. The entire city rejoiced in celebration. The prince and princess were reunited, happier than ever before. Thus, through the princess's true love and courage, they found each other once again and lived happily ever after. The princess, lost in grief, sat with a sorrowful expression, her once radiant face now pale and lifeless. When she saw the prince standing before her, she could hardly believe her eyes. The prince smiled and said, "My love, I have returned to you." Tears welled up in the princess's eyes as she rushed towards him, embracing him tightly. "Is this a dream?" she whispered, afraid that if she blinked, he might disappear again. The prince held her hands and said, "No, my love, it is not a dream. I am here in flesh and blood only because of your devotion and sacrifice." The entire palace rejoiced at their reunion. The king, seeing his daughter happy once more, felt an immense sense of relief. The prince then narrated his story, how he had been cursed to live as a monkey, and how the princess's love had broken the curse. The queen, who had once burned the monkey skin in ignorance, wept and begged for forgiveness. The prince forgave her, understanding that a mother's actions were always driven by love for her child. A grand celebration was held in honor of the prince and princess. The kingdom, once shrouded in sorrow, was now filled with joy. The prince and princess lived happily together, bound by the love that had survived trials, separation, and even magic. And so their story became a legend, a testament to love's power to conquer all obstacles. The prince smiled and said, "Yes, princess, it was your love that pulled me back here. Your mother tried her best to destroy me. She burned my entire body. I barely survived, and the only thing I took with me was this ring. Double asterisk." She then told him everything, how she disguised herself, how she endured the journey, and how she cured him. The prince was overwhelmed with emotion. The princess continued, "My mother was never your enemy. When she saw you as a human, she burned the monkey skin, thinking that would free you forever. But the real mistake was yours. You never told me why you had to wear that skin. If I had known, I would have guarded it with my life." The prince sighed and said, "I never got the chance to tell you. Let me explain everything now." He then recounted his story. "About a year ago, I was out hunting with my men. I spotted a deer and shot an arrow, but the deer vanished. I chased after it and ended up deep in the jungle, completely separated from my companions. There, I saw an old man sitting with a 12-year-old boy. The boy's leg was bleeding. The old man was weeping and cursing the person who shot the arrow. Then he saw me and shouted in anger, 'Are you a human or a monkey? You have no manners at all.' The moment he said that, I transformed into a monkey. He cursed me, saying I would wander the forests endlessly with no home. I was devastated. I fell at his feet, begging for forgiveness. The boy, seeing my misery, pleaded on my behalf. He told his grandfather, 'When someone acknowledges their mistake, they deserve forgiveness.' The old man finally softened and said, 'I cannot take back my curse, but I can lessen its effect. You will remain a monkey for 7 years. However, if a girl shows you kindness and marries you, the curse will break early. But if you marry before the full 7 years are over, you will only be human in front of your wife and a monkey in front of the world.' Heartbroken, I wandered the jungle for 6 months until your father found me and took me to his palace. Then he married you to me, and you know the rest of the story." As the prince finished his tale, the queen and the king, who had been listening from a distance, stepped forward. The queen, with tears in her eyes, begged for forgiveness. The prince smiled and said, "I hold no grudges. You acted out of love for your daughter." The king then spoke, "I have no son of my own. From today onward, you will be my son and rule this kingdom after me." A grand celebration followed, and the prince and princess lived happily ever after, proving that love, patience, and forgiveness could overcome even the most powerful of curses. The prince smiled and said, "Now I must take my bride back to my kingdom to introduce her to my father, but I promise you I will return and support you whenever needed." With that, the prince took his princess and returned to his palace. There he reunited with his father, who welcomed them with open arms. From that day on, the prince and princess lived happily ever after, cherishing their love and the journey that brought them together. Friends, I hope you enjoyed this story. If you want to hear more such fascinating tales, make sure to subscribe to Masayeda Ki Awaz and become part of our family. Thank you for your support.